It is now 7:05, so I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight. This is the first of Church Leadership Essential courses we're going to be presenting. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask throughout the presentation. Easy way, if you go down to the bottom of the Zoom, there's a button that says Reactions. If you click on that, you can click on Raise Hand, and we will try to get to you in the order that the hands go up. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here.
And Ron, while you share the screen, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So a little bit of a backdrop to this. For those of you that haven't attended a meeting like this, when I got involved with the diocese from St. Andrews as a delegate and then later as treasurer, we would hold bishop days under Bishop Marty's term, and we would hold one in Kansas City. We held one in Springfield each year, so a couple of weekends, a couple of Saturdays, to just talk about not only what we're going to talk about tonight, but other stuff too. So this is a little bit more compartmentalized and a little bit more efficient way to disperse the information. So that was the genesis of the Zoom meeting tonight.
Okay. And we'll get started here. Tonight, we're going to do some introductions from Tom and myself. We'll talk about how the covenanted portion is calculated, talk about the business manual, getting donations using PayPal, which is something we've started doing with COVID, and it's been pretty popular for the churches that are using it. We'll talk about discretionary funds, audits, and then we will have some time for questions and answers. So about Tom, he's, as he just mentioned, a lifelong member of St. Andrews in Kansas City, former member of the vestry. He's former treasurer, president, and past board member of Bishop Spencer Place. Became the treasurer in January of 2008 after a very long and hard campaign. He fought off many other people wanting the position.
Yes, very difficult.
I still get drawn to tears at your acceptance speech. 40-year career in finance, and he's also a finance chair for Swope Health and Pace KC. Tom retired, I think, 2 years ago, and he's one of those people who seems busier now that he's retired than he was when he was working.
Unfortunately, that's true, but don't let my former employer know that.
About me, I am a member of St. Thomas the Apostle, just across the state line here. I was a former treasurer and vestry member there. I've been with the diocese for 8 years this month and have over 20 years of accounting experience. Tom is the treasurer for the diocese, which means he's a volunteer, not a member of the staff. He chairs the finance and assessment review committees. He's an officer at convention. He works with the financial staff members, attends and reports to council meetings, helps with the plan for ministry, and works with the auditors. As for me, I am a member of the diocesan staff. I oversee the financials, reconcile the balance sheet accounts, and incorporate internal controls. I work with churches and diocesan staff, work with the auditors. I am available for parish audits, and we'll talk about that a little later. And then any other duties as the bishop and Tom decide to give me. And here's my diocesan contact info. Most of you, I'm pretty sure, saw the message that this is being recorded and will be put out in video form on the website. So
Ron, before you go into this, I would like to say to all the attendees, when I became part of the diocese finance spectrum, I first met with the prior treasurer. I met with the finance administration staff, as well as the bishop, obviously Marty. And I would not have accepted this job if I didn't think we had the utmost, due diligence with our staff, our finance staff at the DIO. So I just wanted to put that out there. Again, I don't go into these things lightly, and they do a great job. So with that accolade, proceed.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to go over the covenanted portion calculation. It's a basis of total operating revenues less any outreach that's in your operating budget. If the current year is higher than the previous year, we do an average of the two for the basis. If the current year is lower than the previous year, we use the current year. This allows churches that are growing to grow into the new higher assessment, but gives immediate relief to churches that have seen a decline. And there's an example at the bottom of the screen, just showing how we come up with that basis. And this is kind of the progressive tax system we use to determine the assessments. Okay, Tom, would you like to?
Yeah, so one of the things that has changed a lot with our diocese over the last decade, and we just kind of do a rolling decade reflection on where we were and where we are now. We're fortunate that we've been able to reduce the assessment burden on the congregations within the diocese to a pretty significant extent. Favorable markets have been a part of it. Not only that, we've reduced the assessment rates as mandated by convention a few years ago, Resolution 6 specifically. And so our income structure has changed dramatically, I think, for the good. And your finance committee, they're not all years are going to be good as far as the finance markets go, but our calculation kind of smooths that out for us. We take a 4-quarter average. And so if we do go into a prolonged correction in the stock market, for example, it won't have a dramatic impact on your diocese's finances. And for those churches that are on this call that have, long-term investment funds, I think that's something you would look to do if you do a draw on your long-term assets. We do at the diocese, we do, it's a little bit less than this, but basically a 5% draw our long-term assets to help finance operating income for the diocese. So I'm just throwing that out there. Next slide, or any questions?
Larry, did you have a question or?
Ron, and Tom, I did, but you answered it, Tom. The fact that investment income is really a draw from the dividends or of the investments versus taking from the principal. But you already said that.
Right. I mean, in some years, if the stock market's down a lot, like down 10 or 15%, we still do a 5% draw, that's going to lessen our return, obviously, because we've drawn some funds out. but usually in a typical investment portfolio, which is 60-40, 60% risk assets such as equities and whatnot, and then the other 40% being fixed income. A 5% draw from an actuarial standpoint is sustainable for not-for-profit organizations such as ours and others that I'm involved with. So it's prudent and to my mind, reasonable.
Yeah, thank you. And while I'm talking, it might be helpful to really point out that 3% that's going to regional ministries. That's the deanery grants, which I think have been a really positive thing in our diocese. So it's nice to see that.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I've been so happy about while I've been involved as treasurer, we've boosted those deanery grants to aid all 47 churches. Whoever wants to, request a grant. We've done ADA projects. We've done very pious ministry outreach things, but it's boots on the ground, knowing where it could be diapers, it could be who knows what, but what helps out their community. And I think for the purposes of this meeting, I think your council's even thinking how we can broaden that so we can touch every parish more significantly.
Okay, well.
So our expense breakdown, you'll see here in this pie chart that the bulk of it is administrative and governance. This actually is a little bit misleading slide, only because we've kind of changed up our personnel lineup with taking on Bishop Diane. She did not feel we needed to pay a canon of the ordinary during her time as provisional bishop, which is actually a big expense savings to the diocese. And if we incorporated what that would have been, actually the breakdown would be a little bit more favorable, because canon of the ordinary is a little bit, for many dios, they'll categorize it as congregational development. Some don't, we do, but I want to tell you that our percentage of administration and governance expenses versus peers, which Ron has done a great job over my time as treasurer, looking at the data with comparable dioceses that have similar numbers of congregants, similar number of congregations, and we compare favorably. We're in the right area code, so there's no anomalies there. I'll happy to accept any questions there. Okay.
I don't see any, so. Okay, and next we want to talk about the manual of business methods in church affairs. This is something that's done by the Episcopal Church, or DFMS. It's available online, and it was last updated in December of 2019. The manual covers financial management, internal controls. It has a very nice internal control checklist you can use. Bookkeeping, taxes, discretionary funds, audit guidelines, insurance, parochial reports, and there's a record management and retention schedule at the back that I would encourage anyone to use, especially if you're deciding to do a cleanup day and trying to figure out what you need to keep and what you don't. Okay, PayPal. We have had a PayPal account in the diocese since 2014, and beginning with the pandemic, we were trying to help avoid churches recreate the wheel. So we worked with Gary Almond, who was able to set up donation buttons that the churches could use on their website. Any donation that's coming in through that, the diocese is covering the fees associated. The fees, I believe, are down to 2.2% plus 49 cents per transaction. But if someone gives your church $100, you will get a check from the diocese for $100. And if you'd like to add the donate here link to your website, contact our communication director, Gary Almond.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
By adding that onto our website, then the diocese still gets charged for the service fees? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. There's a charge no matter what. We get the not-for-profit rate, which is greatly reduced from the normal PayPal surcharge.
Okay.
It's very nominal.
It is.
Right.
It's very nominal. And I think, go ahead. I'm sorry, Cindy.
No, I didn't mean. No, I said we use that right now, but I didn't realize that we could have that put on our personal website, our church's website, and the diocese will pay for the fees. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, and I think it may be on yours already as we send you checks monthly. We get, so Gary may have stealthily put it up somewhere on your website that you don't know, but.
Okay.
And this is Tom. I just want to touch on this a little bit. I think, especially as the demographics in our church are changing and, you know, our ability to attract new family units and whatnot, I think this is the way people want to pay these things. My wife and I, years ago, rather than writing a check at the end of the year when sometimes we were squeezed for our pledge, we finally adopted doing ACH and just doing a monthly on our checking account, which basically made it painless, and it just became part of our budget. And now with these links and PayPal and whatnot, this can all be set up so easily. So I think that's important, and I think it's doable even for our smaller congregations if you get in touch with Ron to make this happen.
Okay, and Tom, did you want to address this?
Oh, so one of the things that was that I reflected on when I became or was asked to become the treasurer of the diocese, I wanted to understand a little bit about what the benefits of a hierarchical church are. And I know this is when I served on the vestry at St. Andrews, you know, which is a fairly large church, and a pretty big portion of our budget goes to the diocese. And then the questions come up, what do we get for that versus being a congregational type of setup versus a hierarchical church. And I reflected on that a lot. And I've been involved with the diocese some, but on reflection, the things that this diocese has accomplished in its time in Western Missouri is amazing. Over the 100+ years, that these are things that would not have been accomplished by one or two parishes just pairing up. We wouldn't have St. Luke's Health System, Bishop Spencer Place, Nourish Kansas City, which feeds thousands and thousands of people, Council of the Ozarks, just an amazing host of things. And I could probably go on and list off 4 or 5 others that this church in Western Missouri continues to contribute. So I just think everybody needs to know that. And quite honestly, the bulk of our budget each year is trying to nurture those things, the grants we give to Nourish Kansas City, Council of the Ozarks, and so on and so forth. And your bishop is attached to these things too. It's a great church. So anyway, those are my comments about that.
Okay, and I just know some in the chat, Amy Garcia had asked if the link to the business manual could be posted in the chat. I will do that once we are out of the PowerPoint presentation. So. Okay.
I think I pretty much went through this slide. As often I get ahead of myself with this stuff, but I will tell you with the second to last item, supporting the Bishop Kemper School for Ministry, we've got a lot of candidates who have been in there over the last couple of years. It's very encouraging. And while I touch on that, which I should have mentioned before to this group as we're going through the DIO slides about income and whatnot, it is amazing how well our diocese has done during the pandemic. As per the parochial reports, the annual giving from our churches, it's down a little bit, but not a lot, given how much we were worried about things in March of 2020. And that shows you a resilience that we should all be very proud of. I don't know if proud's right or feeling grateful for, absolutely. And we can move on.
Okay, move on to clergy discretionary funds. These are established by canon. They are to be used for pious and charitable uses as by the rector or priest in charge, or some deacons have them. Source of funds, canons state that on one Sunday in each calendar month, the loose offering should go to the clergy discretionary fund. I would say that's good guidance, but you can drift away from that and adjust it to what you find the discretionary fund needs are. And anyone is allowed to contribute to a clergy discretionary fund. The use of the funds needs to be used for aid for the poor or other purposes the rector considers pious and charitable. The funds are not gifts to clergy. They must be used to carry out the mission of the church, but they are not to be used to cover items in the vestry's budget. There are 2 ways to actually keep the discretionary fund. Some just make it a line item on the balance sheet, which is fine. Other churches have opened up a separate bank account. That's fine. Either way is okay. But if you open up a separate bank account, you need to make sure that it is in the congregation's EIN number. The bank statement should be mailed to someone other than the rector or priest in charge. And the account needs to be reconciled monthly, just like your regular bank account. Random audits should be done just to ensure everything is being properly handled. I say this because, as Tom has said in other presentations, there are 2 ways that clergy can get in trouble: inappropriate relationships with parishioners and finances. So you do this not only to protect the church, but also to protect your clergy. So treasurer or designee should do a random audit, just verify that canceled checks are backed up with receipts, that no checks are made out to cash or family members. Whenever possible, checks should go directly. So if someone comes in needing help with an electric bill, the check should be paid to the electric company. And if any issues arise that require further investigation, please contact me at the Bishop's office. Okay, diocesan audit policy. The canons require that every diocese have an audit policy. We came up with ours in April of 2017. As I said, the business manual basically says that every church or mission needs to have an audit done, but they don't define what they don't define what an audit is to them. So we made a policy that any church that has annual operating income of $500,000 or more needs to get an independent audit done from outside the church. As many of you are probably aware, independent audits are very expensive, and this is why we've made $500,000 the threshold. It also happens to be that the churches that meet that threshold were already meeting this requirement. Churches with annual operating income under $500,000 can do an internal audit using an audit committee. These can comprise of anyone other than, I would say, the treasurer, or I'm always free to come out and do audits. I've been out as far as West Plains, so if I'm willing to drive to West Plains, I'm willing to drive to you. And yeah.
And I just want to applaud you for that. Ron does this for a number of parishes, and I applaud you for doing that.
Thank you. And the audits are required annually. The results should be presented to the vestry or bishop committees and then sent to the diocese by September 1st. And that's it. Now we can open it up for questions and answers, or for any questions. I am just going to stop sharing my.
Well, I guess I'll break the ice by just saying I appreciate everybody being on the call tonight. I know it takes precious time, but one of the great things about Zoom is we used to, as I mentioned at the outset, we used to have to travel to do this, but it's so great to see so many faces. It's easy peasy. We don't get to chat like you would in a normal meeting, but appreciate everybody's time.
I do have a couple of questions, Tom or Ron, but they might be something that we can take offline, so it's about payroll and any recommendations on a payroll service that somebody might have that is really loving their payroll service.
Well, I'll answer that real quickly. The Episcopal Church has a deal with ADP, and we've been using ADP since I started here. Mm-hmm. I think for the diocese, and we have we have fluctuated between 10 to 15 employees on payroll, and I want to say it's about $60 a month. And
60?
they do
60.
60. Okay. So it'd probably be smaller for churches with only a few employees, but.
And what do they provide? Do they do all the W-2s and the quarterlies, the 941s? And
yes,
okay.
Yes. And in fact, I go in quarterly, pull the 941, and I can reconcile it to the penny to everything with everything that's gone through payroll. So
can you send me information on that?
Sure, I will.
And by the way, using that ADP app or program it's been great for me as a treasurer. I can review everything. I can see, it'll even point out anomalies in what they see as the checks that are being issued. And it's a great review process. And ultimately, I'm the one that approves the disbursement.
Okay.
Okay, I see some hands up. I'll start with Father Joe.
Thanks. My question is about the PayPal thing for churches that the diocese is doing. Can churches still opt into that, or is that period closed?
No, churches can still opt in.
And so I guess if churches can still opt in, great. My question comes then, what I'm facing with my vestry who is afraid of online giving, how do, it's Carthage, sorry, we're like 50 years behind everybody, but the internet's new, sorry. How do we get reports on who's donated so that we can stay up with like pledging units and stuff like that? As all that shake out?
Yes. Okay. What happens is if someone goes in and makes a contribution to the church, I get an email that gives me their name, their email address, tells me what church the contribution is for, and then any instructions. For instance, if someone's giving for the flowers, I put together an Excel spreadsheet that I maintain to record that information. Near the end of the month, we try to do it in the last day of the month, but sometimes we have to do it a little earlier. I will send out a report to usually the priest, the treasurer, and office admin with that information. And then about a week later, you should get a check for that month's donations. Okay.
Hey, can I add something though to that, Ron? The only thing that you might have to work with is at the end of the year, if you get the check after year end, you might have to make some adjustments because everybody wants, people would want to know what their donations are for the year. And if you get that check from the diocese the month after, like in November and January instead of December, but Ron he's really good about putting down when they received the check. Yep. So he puts that date down that he got the check in. So that's what you kind of have to look at. And we did have, because of, especially at the end of the year, I think we had to record all that information on December 29th. And then we did have a couple of donations that came in before the 1st. And those are legally donations that count for the tax year that they are made. So we did send that information to the churches and then kind of made them aware the next month when we sent in the spreadsheet that, hey, these were the ones we sent you just before the end of the year. So any other questions on PayPal? I will go to Father Larry.
Thank you, Ron. This wasn't in your overview, and so please just tell me to move on. But it's I think, a real benefit that I hope all of our parishes would be aware of. Part of that Resolution 6, which was at a diocesan council a number of years ago, concerned the repurposing of what was called the expansion fund. And what I'd invite Tom and Ron to say a little bit more about is the possibility of getting a line of credit with 0% interest for special needs in a parish. An example might be repair to your plant if you have a historical church. Could we hear a little bit more about that? And if that's inappropriate, we can talk about the royals.
Tom, you're on mute.
Sorry, this is an issue that's dear to me because I became treasurer as we headed into Resolution 6. And there was a repurposing of the expansion fund, which at that time, and my numbers may be rough here, but was about $1.4 million. That was one of the funds in our DIO number of accounts as long-term investment funds that were in, a typical portfolio of 60-40, but it was one piece of our pie, so to speak, that we weren't doing a 5% draw on. So at that time, in trying to resolve Resolution 6 in a way that would be passed at convention, we incorporated using a 5% draw on that fund to make it part of operational income. At the same time, we reduced by about $140,000 or so operational expenses. So ultimately, Resolution 6 reduced DIO assessments to the 40, at that time, 48 parishes, a little over $200,000. So that's the background there. When, and there had been precedent for using the expansion fund to provide LOC, liquidity, line of credit liquidity for a church. As your treasurer, I prefer to keep banks out of our financial affairs as much as we can, as far as lending goes, and we've got resources and whatnot. And so when the pandemic happened, we did have some churches that had drawn LOCs to address, HVAC needs or this or that, liquidity. And we used to charge 3%. And when the pandemic hit and we didn't know what was going to happen with diocesan finances or our congregations, we decided to reduce all those loans to 0%. And we also, council approving any new LOCs coming in at 0%. We felt that the nominal cost to us as a diocese was insignificant to the help it could be for those parishes needing liquidity. And again, I wanted them to avoid a bank if possible. So I think at times we've had the expansion fund drawn up to $240,000 or $50,000. I think we're a little bit under 180 now with outstandings. I could be wrong with that. Am I in the right area, Ron?
You're in the right area.
Okay. And it's comfortable, good with it. And quite honestly, the fund has grown. This isn't because of anything we did, but the financial markets have done well generally, if you average it out over the last 5 years. And I think that fund is worth, Ron, instead of 1.4, what I remember is just under $2 million now.
Yep, I am looking up right now, and I believe it is just under 2.
So
yes,
I think it's worked out well with our demographics. We're not going to be building a lot of churches tomorrow. I hope we're building a lot of churches 10 years from now or 15 years from now, but the demographics, as I think most of you are aware, that right now, I think our purpose in my mind, I know, is to grow the flock, but it's also to maintain the flock. And if we, I don't want more parishes closing on my watch. So.
Looks like Mary Sparks has a question.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. When is a good time to schedule an audit for you from you? How soon after the end of the year, fiscal year, should that be done?
I would say anytime starting in, I would say March, going into the summer.
So the procedure is just to contact you and to schedule a time?
Yes. Usually what we do first is once you contact me, I'll send you a checklist. There are some items that if you are able to make copies and send into the diocesan office, helps me out. But there are items or things I have to do physically at the church. But as
right,
much
yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So yes, I would send you the checklist once I got the items back, then we could schedule a date for me to come out.
Okay.
Any other questions? Actually, I have a question. If anyone is using QuickBooks, are you paying a monthly subscription fee currently? And if so, how much?
We are not.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mary.
We are not paying a monthly fee.
Okay. The diocese, we have a 2017 version, and it's now wanting me to update as that's getting pretty far behind. And I'm finding that they no longer allow you to just go out, buy the software and run with it. That now they want a monthly subscription service.
Yeah,
Ron, go to TechSoup, Ron.
TechSoup?
Yes, they're for nonprofit. That's
Okay.
where I got ours for the church, and mine's a 2015.
Okay.
And I pay nothing a month.
And that's currently, we don't pay anything, but what I found so far, but I'm going to try TechSoup because
TechSoup will help you.
It's looking like they want $50 a month. So
Thanks. Ron, you got somebody in the chat also said that $50 a month.
Oh yes, thank you, Amy. Yeah, if I through TechSoup find anything better, I will let you know. Any other questions? I just hope that everyone will be rooting tonight for the University of Arizona as they take on Houston.
Ron?
Yes.
My name's Mike Barnes with St. Paul's. We pay with QuickBooks payroll about $50 a month, but QuickBooks as a standalone program is just on like the Mac or IBM based computers, which we don't pay any monthly fee for it. They do offer an online version, but it's kind of quirky.
Okay.
It didn't seem to work as well, but the $50 a month is what we're paying for QuickBooks payroll, which is a standalone option. They're not tied together really, except by name.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Not hearing anything else. Really appreciate everybody being here tonight and chatting with you all, and wish you well.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.